Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting of council. It's June 17th, 2024. This is being held virtually and in person. So we'll start off here with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which includes Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Tugog Island, Rama, Bosa Lake, and Georgina Island First Nations. The Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of the lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. I'll ask everyone to make sure your cell phones are on vibrate or turned off so it doesn't disturb the meeting. And the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 upgrades and the generator replacement project. This meeting is open to the public to observe the proceedings of council. So remind council of declaration of pecuniary interest if it arises. Declare it done. And we'll start off with the first delegation here is Gustavo Rizzo. Okay, so we'll start off with the presentation around the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 upgrades.
Yes, thank you very much for having me again. Good morning. I'll go through the presentation a bit quicker than last time since we've seen some of it already, but please feel free to stop me anytime or ask any questions. So there's two parts to the agenda of this presentation. First is talking about the wastewater treatment plant, and the second talks about the proposed water and wastewater master plan. So we didn't get to the second part last time, but I assume most of the questions will focus on the first half of the presentation. Just a reminder of where it all started. In 2009, there was the lagoons were converted to a mechanical treatment plant, which is what's currently operating. Then there was some growth proposals, some development proposals that led to the functional study for the South Havelock development in 2018. As part of that, there was a review of flows to the facility that found that the facility was experiencing really high flows, and it was approaching its capacity. Back in 2019, there was some I&I repairs, some replacement of sewers in the township that helped a little bit with that issue. I didn't change this animation, but there was an EA completed last year to look at alternatives, and then if we follow that timeline, the proposed next step would be to begin phase 1 of the upgrades recommended as part of the EA. The other recommendation is to continue with I&I reduction measures to give you more capacity and recover some of the capacity that you're losing through I&I. And then at some point, you're going to have the phase 2 expansion. So the EA that was completed last year identified 3 main issues. There's growth that's planned in the community. That's going to drive an increase in flows to the plant. There's significant infiltration and inflow issues during wet weather conditions that have exceeded in the past the capacity of the plant. And if growth continues at some point, they might lead to environmental concerns and non-compliance issues. And then the third issue was that even though the plant was designed to handle septage and like hold sewage from septic systems, and because of all these constraints, it's limited in its ability to receive septage. So those are the main 3 issues that were identified. The first one related to flows and I&I. You see the green and the blue lines. Blue is what your water consumption is, your drinking water consumption is, and green is your sewage flow. you see there's a significant difference. And then the red line you see there is your capacity for average day flow treatment. So generally, the plant is meeting its requirements, but there's those specific spikes that you see there where there's exceedances of the capacity. And then back in 2019, it was really bad. Like there was situations where there's monthly average flow that exceeded capacity of plant. But then since 2019, some of those flows have been reduced slightly, but you still see those spikes. So the second line that just showed up there is what on average you're seeing at the plant. So there's some capacity to treat some flow on average, but those spikes still continue to happen, and they typically have to do with runoff or wet weather flow conditions. So 820 is the average flow that you're seeing based on the last couple of years. And your capacity is about 1,200 cubic meters. So the 2019 changes to the system bought you around 200 units roughly in terms of recovered capacity. So that is just shows you the significant impact that infiltration and inflow has on the overall flow to the plant, and also in your ability to continue growing. Just some animations here, just showing all the spikes. Yeah. So the Class EA recommended a staged approach to fixing the issues or to addressing the capacity constraints of the plant. The first recommendation was to do a phase 1 upgrade to mitigate the effect of those infiltration and flows, the wet weather flows. And that was recommended to happen as soon as possible. The second recommendation was to continue monitoring the flows of the plant and see the impact of your George Street project and other I&I reduction projects to see how much capacity you gain as a result of that. And then continue pursuing reductions in I&I because as you saw in 2019, there was a significant drop in flows to the plant as a result of that project, which got you about 200 units of recovered capacity. And then there's a financial component of this of these projects. You have to be able to find and fund the money, find the money to fund these projects, right? So there's rates and development charges, and then also funding opportunities that can be pursued. And then the last step of the project or the implementation would be a phase 2 upgrade, but that was recommended to happen later on once you've got about 80 to 90% of your current capacity. And then depending on the timing of development, that could be upwards of 2040, or if development happens fast, it might maybe push earlier. So those were the main recommendations. Phase 1, as I noted, was focused on mitigating wet weather flow, and it was simply taking advantage of the existing lagoon that is commissioned, and then implementing a system that allows flows that exceed the capacity of the plant to go and be stored at the lagoon, and then when the rain event is done, slowly, gradually flow back and treat it all through the plant. So what this does is that it mitigates the risk of flushing out your plant, or like overwhelming the capacity of the plant by more gradually controlling the flow into the plant. So those peaks that you saw, those don't go all the way through the plant. Some of them get stored in the lagoon, and then what that in effect does is it gives you more capacity to handle flows on average, right? Because you're not dealing with those significant wet weather flow events. So it's a relatively simple upgrade. It's a diversion chamber, retrofits to the lagoon, pumping station, and some minor miscellaneous electrical upgrades. So that's phase one. Phase two is significantly more complex because we are actually increasing the capacity of the plant from the 1,200 cubic meters per day, which is what's rated for right now, to I think 1,580 something was the number that was recommended, and that's basically more flow and about, I think we were talking about, it's about 300 more units of development if assuming 3 people per unit. So that is a significantly more complex project because you are adding more processes to treat the flow. So you're adding a new process train, another tank to hold the biosolids, more filtration capacity, etc. And yeah, those is the cost. There's obviously there's a significant difference. Phase one, the estimated high level cost is 5.5 million, whereas the phase two upgrade is significantly higher, close to 15 million. So obviously there's a significant investment required for both projects, but the idea is phase one would be done is a phase one, and we talked about this last time. Phase one solves one problem versus phase two solves a different problem. But the most pressing problem you have right now is the wet weather flow, the problem that phase one was solved. So yeah, we're back to the questions. How much capacity would be gained by completing phase two of the project? We talked about the 300 to 300 units, depending on how many people per unit you got. We talked about the Trent River option as an alternative phase two. Yeah, it is definitely something that could be looked into. At a high level, it doesn't appear to be cheaper because of the distance that you're pumping, the need for a new pumping station, in addition to the need to do significant planning and consultation with the ministry. But it is an option that could be explored in the future. The EA process, I mentioned last time, is being revamped a little bit, but based on the current process, each EA study has a validity about 10 years. So if you complete your works within 10 years, you don't have to redo the EA, unless you're completely change what you're recommending. And then it could be easily amended if a new EA is required. Noting that the ministry is currently changing the process for the EA, so it might not look the same as what the last EA looked like. But yeah, 10 years is the validity of the EA process. We talked about how much capacity could be added with the Trent River versus phase two. So phase two, as it stands right now, is increasing the capacity of the existing plants. The Trent River option would be still, you would need to increase the capacity of the existing plant, but instead of discharging to Plato Creek, you're discharging down to Trent River. So the process itself would be slightly different, but you need a new pumping station and a force main to pump down to Trent River, but you still need a capacity increase. Right? So that's it's just it's a question of how the expansion is done, not whether the expansion is done or not. So it's still, phase two is still required, whether you do it at Plato Creek or not. And then phase one, as I said, is a issue of dealing with those spikes in flow, and you would still need to do that regardless. So again, segue into this question, what problem does the phase one solve? Is dealing with the significant I&I in your system and basically allowing you to react or like to treat a more gradual and more stable amount of flow into the plant, as opposed to dealing with those spikes caused by rain and snowmelt. This is another question that came up. How much could you gain by addressing issues of I&I in your system? Very difficult question to answer, but hypothetically, you could imagine that blue line and I think I have the chart again. If you could make it so that the water that you use, 100% of that water assumes you go to the sewer system, and you could eliminate everything else that comes into the system, then both lines would look very similar. Then you see that reduction would be significantly about 200 to 300 units of capacity on average. If you could make those two lines kind of come together, right? So those spikes, so the fact that you would expect in a sewer system, the water that goes, the wastewater that gets produced, most of it should be coming from your cooking, your showers, and so on and so forth. But in this case, there's a lot of other water that's getting into the system from the groundwater, from infiltration, from other sources. And that's water that, first of all, you're not recovering any rates for. And it's taxing, it's applying pressure on your system. It's costing you money to treat, right? It requires chemicals, it requires manpower, and it also takes away capacity that you could be using for development. So if you could make those two lines converge to each other, then you could gain potentially up to 200, 300 units just by that. By reducing all those flows.
So Gustavo, with the lagoons, using them to take, like that would hopefully eliminate some of those green spikes. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like you would still see that flow go to the plant, but instead of it having to be treated by the plant, now you store it. And then, yeah, so essentially you're gaining like right now you're at 820 cubic meters per day, and you have a capacity of 1,200 cubic meters. So you could go up to the 1,200 cubic meters without fear of flooding or overflowing the plant, right?
So if we were to be able to figure out to get the lagoon going and help us on those spikes, would that allow us the 200 to 300 homes?
Yeah, I think the report in the EA had like a number. So we said like, right now we're assuming that long-term care projects continue, but beyond that, we really recommend you do phase one.
Yes.
And then it would get the next trigger, if you will, for the next study or next project would be when you get 90% of 1,200, right? So you'll continue to see once new units get connected, you'll see what the effect of those is on the system, and you'll see where you are relative to your line there. And then once you get to about 80 to 90%, you start looking at maybe getting more capacity in some way. Right?
Yeah, the part I'm trying to figure out is like to go and spend that kind of money on phase one. I just would like a simple answer. Does that allow us a couple hundred homes, like, you know, to give us a buffer? Like you keep saying 2040, but I'm just thinking in the near future here, if we needed 100 homes or something to come in here, would we be able to do that?
Yeah, so and again, this is all hypothetical, right? Yeah. But I think we have the numbers somewhere, yeah, here. So a house in Havelock, unfortunately, because of all these I&I issues, you are using about 1.5 cubic meters per day of capacity. So if we're talking 820 to say 1,000, so they 200 cubic meters, it's about 200 homes, right? Roughly, yeah. Right? So phase one enables that basically. Right, about 200 units, give or take, depending on the unit, obviously, but that's an average. And then if you, as you say, complete George Street, if you see there's a significant reduction there, then it buys you more time beyond that, right?
Okay, Deputy Mayor Webb, you had a question, and Councilor Doherty.
I forgot. I can ask.
Okay.
These numbers on the screen are nice, but there's no date attached to the 1.48. Is that just today's number?
Yeah, this is based on the average of the last 3 years.
Okay, so what was the number in 2018?
Oh, it was higher. It's a lot higher.
No,
Yeah.
is that right? You think it would be? We did the infiltration to reduce it, so.
Yeah, so 2019 was when the infiltration was reduced, yeah.
Well, what I'm trying to find out is what effect did the 2019 work have to do on the flow? Did it drop at 10 points? Did it drop at 5 points? Did it drop at 2 points? Because to put an average on over 3 years, this is already with the flow work done for 19. So without knowing what the number was prior to, it doesn't mean anything in terms of inflow and what effect it had.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky. Your question is very insightful indeed, but it's tricky to answer because.
Well, why? I don't understand. If you
Like,
did the same numbers and did them from 2015 to 2018, you'd have a number.
Yeah, we do have a number, and then you can kind of see this chart here, right? So you see those big spikes. Those are the chart starts at 2017 and it goes till 2023. And then you kind of see where I don't know what color, purple, the line kind of drops a little bit. That is the effect of the 2019 reduction.
Oh, yeah, I seen that. I just wanted to quantify it in terms of numbers.
Right. Yeah. So the only caveat I would give is that we haven't had a year has had as much precipitation as 2018. So we don't know if all the flow reductions have to do with there being less rain or there being actual less connections to the system. So we cannot say with certainty, but we can say that back in 2018, your rated capacity, your average flow was actually close to 1,200 cubic meters per day, right? On average. And now it's about 820. So it's about 400 cubic meters that you saw in reduction on average between 2018 and what you see now. Now, I don't know if that's all rain or if it's just hasn't rained as much, or if it's just you fully solved the issue with infiltration and inflow in those areas.
Well, you're being asked today to spend $5.5 million. I want to know what the $5.5 million corrects and how it corrects and when it will correct, because this doesn't show me as much as I would like to know, I guess, because infiltration is one thing, and they've done a very good job because the line went down dramatically. We're looking at, or can look at, other things, maybe cheaper than $5.5 million for infiltration to get it down. And the second part of it is the graph shows a peak. Is that a 1-day peak, a 2-day peak? Is it for 2 months, 3 months? Like, how long does that peak last? I guess.
Yeah, those peaks typically last a few hours. Yeah, so it's basically a rain event, right? So it depends on the rain event. Some rain events last longer, but they have a shallower peak or not a sharp peak, where some are very like flash floods, basically, right?
And how do you manage the system with that in mind then?
Brad might be able to help. Brad's the one that works the plant.
So just like your peaks, I've seen peaks as high as below 2,000 cubes there. So 1,500 to 2,000 last up to a month.
A month, okay, good, thanks.
So the big thing with the phase one is to try and eliminate some of the green spikes. It's basically all it's going to do. It's not.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're thinking, you're asking two different questions. How do you deal with the pipes, and how do you deal with the plant, right? So the pipes themselves, the only solution is replace the pipes, right? At the plant, you have multiple options. You can make the plant bigger so they can handle the peaks, or you could say, instead of having all the flow go through my treatment processes, I'm going to take some of it and store it for a little bit. That's what the phase one is talking about. So it's the peaks will still happen. They'll still get to the plant, but they won't have to be treated all at the same time, right? Which makes your processes smaller, right? They don't have to handle the hydraulic jumps, I guess, if that you see those peaks. So to answer your original question is what does phase one do? Well, it allows you to mitigate the risk of getting close to that red line in the middle, which is your true capacity. Your true capacity is 1,200 cubic meters. Right now, I would advise against letting 1,200 cubic meters on average, because then that means your peaks are quite high. which means that they could exceed the capacity, could overrun your plan, they could lead to non-compliance issues. So that's in simple terms, phase one gives you the ability to treat 1,200 cubic meters with minimal risk to non-compliance because of those peaks. I'm sure if that's helps.
Did you have another help with that, Brad, or?
Well, just with your, like having the overflow lagoon, essentially, like I remember very well back in 2018 when we had like a month where we were in there every weekend manually operating blowers on and off manually to keep it in compliance. So that would alleviate all that extra work from an operations point. Makes sense a lot smoother.
If I can do one follow-up, at the top right-hand corner, it says reductions provided additional capacity for growth of 200 units. And I was fine with that until you started muddying the waters with saying long-term care and so on. Is long-term care part of that? What is, if we were to get a developer to call us today and said, we want to build 200 houses today, do we have capacity?
I would say no. Right now, no.
Okay, what would you say then the amount would, or the number would be?
Right now?
Yeah.
My recommend, and again, this is not
No,
my recommendation is you would be putting yourself at risk. If you approve them without having a plan to address this. Like, I mean, I understand units take time to be built. So if during that period of time when you approve the units and they get built, you address the issues, then I think you could get up to 1,200 cubic meters there or close to it, 90% of that, which is, like I said, about 200 units, right? So you could, if you were to start working towards phase one, you could get 200 units approved, yes.
That seems to be a little bit contradictory to what we've heard over the last, at least I have over the last 18 months. We can't build any houses. We can't have any subdivisions. We have no capacity. That doesn't say that. That says we have capacity, but we do need to make other changes to alleviate some of the things that you're talking about. Because a builder called us today and said, we want to put 50 homes in. We've been saying, no, we can't because we don't have capacity. That kind of contradicts that, I think, or am I misreading?
I mean, I think what we're saying is this one first project would be enable or remove the bottleneck in your capacity. So there's some parts that have capacity, but some parts are bottleneck, which is the capacity to handle peaks. Right now, you don't have the capacity to handle peaks.
We never have, it looks like.
Yeah, no, it's been an issue ongoing for a while, right? So, but understanding that the overall green line is made up of whatever people flush and shower and use as drinking water, plus all the stuff that gets in the system. So the more people you have, the more of that baseline flushing and water use increases. So the higher those peaks will get. Also, you get to that 1,200, you'll start seeing peaks of 3,000.
Well,
right?
why would the peaks go up if it's runoff?
Because you're increasing all the baseline flow. So if I have more people flushing and cooking and doing laundry, that base flow, that purple line gets higher, right? And then and if you haven't reduced the amount that gets in otherwise. So imagine that amount is still the same. It's like, let's say for argument's sake that you're 2,000 and 1,200 of that is runoff or infiltration.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of having 800, now I have 1,200. Now I have 2,400, right? Total flow. Because I have the runoff that didn't change, plus I have my base sewage production. So your I&I issues, if there's nothing really other than fixing the sewer system that you can do. Like it's whatever comes in as rain will continue to come in as rain, but what you can control is how many units are producing wastewater, right? At this point. And that's why our recommendation is like, unless you address that issue with the peak right now, don't add more flow to that baseline, because then you're gonna exceed your capacity at the plant. And that's what phase one does. It's trying to give you that capacity back.
Deputy Mayor, have you had a question and
Yeah.
Councilor Flagler?
Councilor Doherty kind of stole my question. I just wanted to know if the long-term care figures were.
Yeah,
Calculated into that.
When we did the numbers last year, it was the assumption that the long-term care was going ahead, and that was already accounted for. But yeah, that was it. I don't think the account.
So on the purple line, though, the purple line that doesn't reflect.
No, it doesn't.
Long-term care. So basically what we did in 2019 in terms of 200 units was make space for what we have over there.
Yeah.
And we're tapped out now. So phase one, you said 200 to 300 units if we do phase one?
Yeah, roughly. If everything in not knowing what's gonna happen with George Street, maybe George Street will give you another 200. I don't know.
No, because it seems to me, just to your point as well, this is an ongoing problem. It doesn't seem like this is something that no matter how much repair we do to the sewers and whatnot, it's not gonna go away. We can control it. And that's kind of what we've done, I think, with a few repairs. But I think given the topography and the fact that this town's built on a swamp, there's always gonna be significant infiltration that we probably don't have in other communities. So I'd like us to be smart about approaching that and not think that we're gonna go in and get rid of this problem, because I don't think it's ever gonna go away. So spend our money wisely in terms of how we look at it. So thanks very much.
Yeah, and I think I have this discussion. This obviously came up last time. Was how do you fix it, right? How do you fix the INI? Like I said, you could look at it two ways. You could look at fix the problem at the source, if you will, or fix it at the end, right? And that's the phase one is fixing it, right? Because well, that's where we can actually control it. But if you were to replace your whole collection system and seal it and put like all the joints and all the manholes, cover them, seal them perfectly, initially you could reduce all that INI, right? Over time, you would still see issues, but obviously that's an expensive endeavor, right? Like we look at that number, $48 million if you wanted to replace your whole system, right? Like because you're digging up the roads, and then once you dig them, you're replacing other utilities too, right? And then so it's a same problem that other small and larger municipalities, frankly, are seeing. It's like it's hard to fix stuff that's on the ground, and so I mean, different folks choose to address it differently, but that's why we presented these two options to say, okay, well, we understand $5 million is a lot of money, but it's cheaper than 48, right?
Yeah. Councilor Flagler had a question.
I just had, actually, it's probably a not so good question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So right now the rainwater is getting mixed in with sewer water, correct? Now if the sewer pipes were fixed down George, do you have a separate pipe that takes just rainwater?
You're supposed to, yeah. You're supposed to have stormwater. It's just the issue is every place is different, but some places actually had like old homes had like a direct connection, like the sump pump,
yeah,
or the roof drains, or the tiles, right, on the houses connected directly to the sanitary system.
Right.
That's been, I mean, the new standard is to disconnect those. So you can have a situation, yeah, where it rains and both water from the rain and both water from the toilets or whatever gets mixed in and goes in the same pipe.
Right.
And I mean, here, fortunately, you haven't had a situation where that starts backing up and starts flooding toilets or basements or whatever, right?
Right, so how does that new lagoon fit in then? Because if you're saying the rainwater is mixing in with the sewer water, how does that stay outside until you can filter it?
Yeah, so it would all go down to the plant.
Yeah.
But the difference is, if you picture the plant, there's these tanks where they have the blowers, right? So there's a bacteria in them that eats stuff. And then beyond that, there's filters. Okay. Those filters can only push so much water through them before they start backing up. So what we're saying here is anything that exceeds that capacity of your filters and your treatment, store it, keep it aside for a bit in that lagoon. And then, so you picture it rains and there's a significant spike, and then the rain stops. And then after a few hours, the flow is more normal. And during that time, you start taking the water from the lagoon and sending it to the plant. So it's like traffic, if you will. Like you have a road with lots of traffic, it's like congestion. But then after the rush hour, those cars can travel faster, right?
So the water's still filtered and then put into
Yeah.
the lagoon until it comes
Yeah.
back to do the process. Okay, thank you.
So basically, it's
Good
kind of
report.
taken away the green
Yeah.
spikes that were there.
Yeah.
It's lowering them down. And it shows that the work that we did in the past,
Oh, yes,
like
it
when we
does.
started in 18, we did help it. Now, when we did the roads, we didn't do the sanitary sewers. We just did water and the sewer. We didn't do the sanitary sewers. So George Street is having the full-blown rebuild. So that's why we're hoping on some good results from that, because it's going to be taken care of. Any infiltration on George Street should be eliminated. And then we talked about at our last meeting about the outlets for the sump pumps and things like that, like putting them, we did that on Union Street, but we never had a plan to get people to hook up to them. So they're in the ground, but they're not being used, most of them, because it was a cost for the homeowner, and most didn't go with it. And we didn't have any enforcement rules in to make them do it. So but that being said, we could come up with a plan with Kathy.
So the lagoons, when I was reading the research on it, lagoons are normally good for approximately 30 years. That's historically, that's what it says, it will last once they're retrofitted, or new lagoons, sorry. So if we retrofit this lagoon, will that not buy us quite a bit of time if we're going to divert things in there for storage?
Oh, I think you're thinking of the old style of lagoon that was back in the day. That's called it's used for treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why they last 30 years is because they fill up with sludge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because every 20 to 30 years you want to empty them. In this case, we're not recommending to do that, just because we don't see the need of you storing flow for that long.
Okay.
Like we see these events as happening, and you within 24 hours you can empty the lagoon. So you're not going to have it full of water all the time. And we don't think you need, there's 2 lagoons right now. We don't think you need the whole volume of the lagoon. You can just use a portion of it, and to reduce costs, just have enough volume that you can handle the peaks, but don't have to spend money on retrofitting the entire lagoon, right?
Okay. So going back, sorry, on the money wise, wasn't there money there for the lagoon?
Yeah, just to do that retrofit.
Just that-
Yeah.
And it's not the full lagoon, it's
That's the
just
full
section.
lagoon, just-
Okay, so what is involved in retrofitting that corner or that part of it?
So we anticipate probably, let's say, the top northwest corner. Sure.
Right, okay, there.
Yeah, so and this is very conceptually, but like you have to drain the lagoon, and then you build a berm, like just to isolate that corner, and then probably you want to put a liner on it, just to make sure that there's no infiltration through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically, and then on top of that, there'd be some piping that connects to a new pumping station to allow you to drain the lagoon.
Okay, pumping station drains lagoon, okay, gotcha, okay.
So that's why we discontinued the lagoons in the first place, is we had a leak that was supposedly happening in the lagoons. And that made us get into the discussion of we were going to put new lagoons in at the time. We looked at it. Some council wanted to, I think Sterling or somewhere has reed beds, and we talked about all that stuff that we were, because it's a cheaper way of dealing with things. You don't have a mechanical plant, just let it do its natural thing with reed beds. But in the end, we ended up going with the mechanical plant, and we were all excited. We had 1,200 cubic meters, and we were going to be doubling our capacity. And then the infiltration part of it came into it, that it wasn't showing the results that we expected. And so we're where we are today. Yeah, and that's kind of a, like you say, it's fixing it at the end instead of catching it in the road, but it's a cheaper alternative. Still expensive, and it looks like it could allow a couple hundred homes in the end to get us through to the 2040, possibly. Like you say, George Street's going to be a big thing to see what impact that has, because back when we first did this, I remember a leak we had up by the car wash, and it was huge. It was the water was coming in there like a it was like a fire hose, and we fixed that, and you could see on those flow charts that you were showing within that month, it made a big difference. But anyway.
Yeah, just further to that, I agree in terms of if you look at, if you eliminate the spikes, I mean, we're down, some of these are down around the 500 level, right? Only at 500 or 600 here, I see. On this, so I mean, if we have a place to put the overflow, we might even have that. So I don't know, but to me, like I said, it's just being able to manage these spike events, right? And if you're gonna put it in the pond or somewhere else, the rest of the time, we're probably running at only half the capacity, if that, by the looks of it. So
yeah, for sure. And then it also helps from an operations perspective, right? If they ever have a failure with a piece of equipment, right? They have the ability now, okay, well, for temporarily, rather than calling the ministry saying I'm going to be out of compliance, you can store the flows. You have more flexibility to deal with risk, right? So it's something like in systems that have we did a project in Lindsay. Lindsay has a similar situation. They actually have a lagoon as well that they use for the same application, right? And they're retrofitting it because they also have loss of land. So it's not an uncommon problem to have in this sort of application, especially since you have it already. You have the infrastructure there. It's just a matter of hooking it up. It makes sense from us a best practice, but understanding that it's obviously for a small community, it's a lot of money. But yeah, just so you see on the screen there, I think the estimate that we got for George Street was 7.1 million. So you see, like, obviously that does a lot of things. It replaces roads, replaces other infrastructure, but just to give you an order of magnitude as to we don't actually know what the effect of George Street will be on reduction of I&I. Ideally, it reduces the same amount as the other one, but maybe it doesn't. Right? Maybe most of your infiltration that's remaining is on the highway. I don't know.
So one of the questions I had when I look at all these numbers is the contingency. I'm used to seeing like 10% contingency, whatever, but 30% contingency on this number is huge, eh?
Yeah, well, 30%, like this is, yeah, I think our tendency is when we're doing these EAs, is to be on the high side, to be conservative. As you get to more details, you would expect that contingency number to go down to 10%.
Yeah.
Right. Once you have more refined details, but at the time when the EA was done, it was very pie in the sky stuff. So it wasn't as accurate an estimate. So I would expect that 5.5 million value to be on the high side for sure.
And maybe if we have a good engineer, it'll be zero contingency, that you're right on the number and we wouldn't have anything.
can we get that in writing?
Yeah, I mean, like I think there's some opportunities to reduce costs for sure.
Okay.
Without saying, this.
Here's a pen, write it down.
But yeah, I think the key is the order of magnitude. It's not gonna go from whatever 5 million to 1 million. No, it's not, right? But it could be 4.5, it could be 4. No, don't know, right? At this point.
Okay, but, I understand. I just that 30% kind of looks kind of crazy. That's all.
It's a high contingency just because of the time. It was a planning level estimate.
Okay. Any other questions around that?
So I think okay, so we talked about this last time too, was the strategy recommended by the EA was two-phase expansion with I&I reductions throughout. Understanding that phase one was recommended as soon as possible. And I have the number 136, but it could be depending on your actual average, it'd be 136 to 200 units potentially you gain before you trigger in the next expansion. And then if you gradually replace your collection system over the next 25 years, you could see upwards of 300 units potentially recovered. And then your future expansion would then get you another 200 or so, or 300 units. But that's recommended in the future when you are at that threshold.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then, yeah, just for illustration purposes, just the cost per unit that we put in there is just to illustrate, like, yeah, phase one is relatively cheap per unit compared to the other options, right?
Right.
So if you were to replace your system, then you're talking about $46,000 to $62,000 per unit, right? And then per unit of development unlocked, right? So if you were to apply, say, development charges to a new development, you say, hey, I charge you 40,000, I can charge you 62,000, right? And obviously replacing your whole collection system will take longer than just the phase one upgrades. So, and obviously there's traffic and other implications. So yeah, so that's the first strategy, the one that we recommended. Now, just for illustration purposes, if you were to replace everything today, it's like if you just replace the sewers, that's 14 million. But if you are replacing roads, water mains, that's, like I said, 48 million, right? So it's not cheap. So if the question is, where's the money coming from? I think it's easier to get $5 million than to get 48, right? Or whatever. But yeah, you just for illustration purposes there, you see there's two projects. There's only if you do replace your I&I problems, you don't need the peak attenuation, right? You don't need phase one, right? So at some point you would still need phase two because you're going to reach your capacity, but if you could magically reduce all those spikes, then you wouldn't need phase one.
How do you magically remove rain?
Yeah, I was just thinking Rogers is building all these cell towers. Maybe we could get a dome put over Havelock and the dome down in Toronto, and it'll eliminate all the rain.
You could direct it all just to the farmers' fields, to the gardens.
We put eavesdrops around town, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not an easy problem to solve.
No.
But so just to summarize the recommendations in the past were phase one, do as soon as possible. Understanding there's the long-term care project that's already been approved, but there's other developments that want to go ahead and we would advise start looking at phase one as soon as possible so that you don't get in a situation where your capacity gets exceeded, and then continue monitoring the close to the plant. Let's see what happens with that George Street project. Hopefully that gives you another 200 plus units of recovered capacity. And then as you grow, as your new units come online, see what that flow is coming in. And when you're about 90%, 80 to 90%, that's when you want to start looking at the next expansion. And obviously there's that asset management, water, sewer rates, and DCs that kind of complete the picture to make sure that you're able to recover the cost of these upgrades through development. And we talked about funding opportunities. There's, we don't know any active right now, but we know there's all this push for new development for the province, so we anticipate there being more opportunities to apply for funding, and these projects typically emphasize projects that are kind of shovel ready, if you will. So that's another thing to look into for sure. Phase 2 upgrades would be the last piece of the puzzle, if you will. And that's it for the recommendations for.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Monday, I'm a little slow this week, so 200 units capacity. Now, do I take 128 off of that for the long-term care?
No, sorry, in what context, for phase 1, you mean?
No, just the capacity.
No, so we're saying,
Sorry, the mayor's, what?
It's already included in that. That's what I think we said a little while ago, that the long-term care was included in the numbers that you have there already.
yeah, so
I've heard, every time I hear is we just get a number and then we muddy the waters by saying, let's do long-term care. Long-term care is already accounted for. This is 200 units more available, right?
if you do phase 1. Yeah, if you do phase 1.
Yeah.
136 to 200.
Yes. So maybe I'll go back to, if you know specifically which slide number, but so we've been throwing this 200 number.
Sorry, it's just, I don't mean to interrupt, but there are significant I&I issues. And then it says reductions provide additional capacity for growth of 200 units.
I see. Okay.
So that to me is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So either we have or we have not. It's
I think in the context, sorry, I confused you there. So what I was talking about here is, if you compare the flows from 2018 to after that leak or whatever it was that was found in 2019 was fixed, what that essentially gave you was a reduction in flows equivalent to 200 units, right? That was, if you look the 2018 versus the average for the last few years. So that has nothing to do with the long-term care or the phase 1 expansion. It's just simply saying that there was a significant reduction in flow between 2018 and now. That's all it's talking about. It's not referring to how much capacity you have now. It's just saying that you reduce the flow between 2018 and 2019 by that much. Now, if you integrate, to try to kind of close the loop here, the long-term care system, once it gets connected and hooked up and starts using water, you would expect some of that capacity to be used up. Some of that 200 spare capacity that you use, that will be.
that's just what I asked though.
Yeah.
And I have several different opinions on it. What you're telling me now, and I understand that, is that does take away from that capacity number.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the bottom line, what we're saying is
36.
Yeah. What we're saying is, our recommendation would be to not, beyond that long-term care project, to not approve any more development until you have a clear timeline as to when you're gonna do phase 1, right? Because, and then once phase 1 is completed, then you can basically say to those 50 units and whatever, okay.
No, I guess I'm looking for a little bit more leverage there, is because if we approve it, we don't have to wait till it's finished, because if you said to a developer today, build houses here, it's 3 years, 5 years out.
Yeah.
So we'd like to kind of maybe act in unison with the expansion.
Yeah.
At least that would be my thing. I don't.
No, I agree. And that's what I'm saying. If you have a plan, a timeline for phase 1, then you could time it so it says, okay, the units are not going to come online until 2025, 2026, whatever. Then by then, you'll see in the timeline that phase 1 should be completed. And then you'll unlock that remaining, that we 200 or 136 units, whatever we talked.
So yeah, just to that, when we add the long-term care onto that, you're saying that you think it's going to bring us near our capacity, but we still could have room there in terms of there might be 30, 50, however many houses that we could build, but we're gonna be so close to our capacity that we don't want to take that chance in terms of having them, you know, call the ministry and say we're out of compliance. We want to raise our level,
But
so we don't get to that.
it specifically says reductions provide additional capacity for use. So that is, but we've already used 128 units of that for long-term care. So we don't have capacity for 200.
Right, yeah, like that's the message we're saying, like you don't have capacity for 200, like to approve 200 new units right now. That's what the message simply.
But the graph is an old graph. So what it's saying is the reductions provided in 2018 provided additional capacity, which were then taken up by the long-term care.
Yeah.
Right? Or however many of those.
Yeah, this doesn't account anything that hasn't been connected to the system, right? So this is just actual flow that came to the plant. So any development that was approved since then that hasn't been connected, it's not reflected here. Yeah.
So to the deputy mayor's point here, like the long-term care was figured into this. And Amber, I don't know if you can help, but it was figured in when we issued the permit to build the thing. Our numbers were allowing it, but that was it. Like that was with all of these spikes and all that going on, we weren't. I think there was maybe 26 more homes or something that might have been allowed after that, and we've probably done a lot of infilling in town already with some of those connections. So we're there. But that being said, the whole idea like that, so that 820 on this actual graph, when you're saying about connecting the, it's probably going to affect some of that 820, I would think, when we do connect the long-term care to it, but we're still within our capacity, you know, like for the 128 units or whatever the number comes out of that place once it connects up.
Yeah, and the reason for that is it's basically that drop that you got from that I&I reduction project in 2019. So that really bought you additional capacity.
Okay.
So I can, oh, sorry. So yeah, this was talking about the timeline for phase one was just in line with what we did. If it goes ahead, then it would be completed by 2026. So if you have development applications that go through that process and are timed such that they don't come online until 2026, then you basically have just-in-time capacity. So yeah, so right now we're I guess the goal is to get direction on whether or not to proceed with phase one, understanding sort of the quote-unquote master plan of implementation and understanding that it would be a multiple year project or process or program to monitor those I&I reductions and the flows that come in through new development. Only when you get a certain threshold, then do you plan for the next phase, which we expect to be in, depending on rate of development. So yeah, so part of kind of what we have to do, and we're going to, the reason why we have those 30% contingencies, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So we would have to do additional investigation, geotechnical, hydrogeological investigation, and other types of studies that have to be done to characterize what has to be done. And once we have that information, it reduces the risk to the estimate and reduces the contingency, right? So as we progress through that design phase, when you get to that 100% detailed design, you would expect your contingency to be significantly lower than 30%. So yeah, that's sort of generally what the scope of the project would be from an engineering perspective. There'd be three stages of design, then tendering, construction, and expected to be completed by 2026 if it starts this year. And then, so the component of the engineering is part of thing, the 5.5 already included the engineering. So the component of the design would be this, and that'd be a separate component associated with the construction services. But that could be discussed further after the project gets tendered. And then just to give you a hint, it also one opportunity for reduction of costs is that when we put in the cost estimates for engineering, we put a very high number just to be conservative. We put like I think 20% or something of the total capital cost. But if the capital cost goes down, it's not gonna be as high. And depending on the specifics of the project and the requirements for construction services, the overall engineering amount would actually be lower too. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, that's about reduction of maybe 5% to the overall cost of the project. But just wanted to note that. So that's it for the first part of the presentation. Don't know if there's any other questions.
Basketball funding.
Yeah.
So Gustavo, I know you have indicated previously that SEMA is always keeping an eye out for funding opportunities, for any grant opportunities that may come. Is there anything on the horizon that you can share with us today?
I got your message last week, and I haven't had a chance to speak to one of our colleagues. He's part of the called Association of Consulting Engineers and whatever, I forget what the ACEC, I think it's the name of the association, and they've been talking to members of parliament and folks in province to try and see what's coming up, and also with the federal government. So the general message is yes, there's more money coming. Just the specific programs we don't have any information on, but we have a direct sort of connection and line of communication with those folks to get information on those as soon as they come. I understand there was that Hughes one, the enabling housing whatever project. There might be another phase of that coming up as well, but there's definitely going to be more projects. We think more grant opportunities.
And I think when we started this process, that was some of the ideas to get some of these numbers so we can work on them, because even at the county, there's 3 of us or 4 of us that have wastewater treatment plants, so that we're identified as future growth areas. Because of that, if you don't have the sewage treatment, you kind of fall down the list on some of these grants. But that being said, at least we have these numbers to start working with. Like, these are scary numbers with a small community like this. I was talking to Aqua before the meeting, and you know, some of them numbers in phase 2 with a little community like this, it's almost not worth it. Like, you know, for a couple hundred homes to spend $14 million, like you said, with your numbers there on development fees, it's there's no way. So hopefully the province will be able to help some of the communities that have these wastewater treatment plants, and encourage, if they're really serious about encouraging growth, they'll be helping us on these things, and we need these numbers to be able to work on it. So I do thank you for that. So there'll be 2 parts to this, as far as, do you want to finish the next part of it, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, so the second part was through our conversations, and obviously these questions that came up today, it's like, well, how many units can I approve? How many, when can I approve them, and so on. And that's where it kind of led to us say, well, do you have a master plan for water and wastewater? And Township doesn't have one. So our recommendation was to us, in parallel to with all these discussions, is to start looking at stuff here. But okay, yeah, so it's looking at not just the wastewater treatment plant, because so far we've only been talking wastewater treatment plant and indirectly the collection system. But there's other components. There's a pumping station that pumps to the plant. We haven't talked about that. And then there's water, right? Drinking water. So at some point you might have a situation where you have the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant, but you don't have the water treatment capacity. So then what does that mean? Do you have to drill another well or get water from somewhere else, right? And that's the type of questions that a master plan would answer. It's like, how much growth are you expecting? How are you going to service it? What projects do you need? How much is it going to cost? And then what is the impact on development charges or your water rates or sewer rates? And ultimately be able to answer the question, how many units can we approve and when can we approve them? So, yeah, we've only been talking about waste, unfortunately, the $5 million only talks about wastewater treatment plant, but there might be similar amounts that have to be invested in, for the water system, right? And we, SEMA, we haven't actually looked into the details as to what the gaps are there, but that's our recommendation would be to have a master plan that brings it all together. So you have a full report that says, year one, you need to do A, B, C, D, and this is how much money you need. And if you need to go for funding, you ask for the highest priority items, the bottlenecks, right?
Okay, I just got one question back to the environmental study report, or you keep going. It's just, it was in the recommendations that the township should complete annual reviews of their flows to the plant, assess the effects of I&I and the capacity taking into account development. And it says they should complete the ministry's procedure D51. So is that, like, who does that? Should the town have, like, you do that? So we would send flow data, you complete that procedure, and that tells you how much capacity they have. Like, it's recommended to do annually. So is that something you can do yourself? Or
I mean, it's something that could be done either by us or by Aqua or by the township. It's this D51 procedure. I think it's called the unallocated capacity calculation. So it's kind of tied to what we were talking about. You have, what is your capacity? So for the plant, 1,200 cubic meters per day, or however many units. And then how much capacity do you have? Well, you take the amount of flow that you're seeing minus all the flow that you expect to receive from all the development that's ongoing or that's been approved. So the long-term care is not shown on that graph. So I account that for that. I account for everything else I have approved, and then I get a number. That number is how many units I can actually approve, right? So we haven't actually done the calculation, so I cannot answer that number with certainty, but that's something that should be done on an ongoing basis so that at any point in time, you know, I can approve 30 or I can approve 50, whatever, right? And that's what that's referring.
So an engineer doesn't have to do that.
I mean, it's
like the town could do that themselves.
The township could do it, or Aqua could do it, or I mean, as part of the master plan, we would answer that question in day one, but on an ongoing basis, as more development gets approved, you would have to update this calculation, right? And so typically what we've seen other municipalities do is when you do your annual report for wastewater, you include that as an appendix, right? To say, okay, this is what the plant is seeing as far as flow, but then planning has told us they've approved X many units. So the remaining capacity is this, right? And that's useful for the township.
Quite useful for the township.
Yes, yes. And yeah, so there's a whole procedure that ministry has it. So it's a standard calculation. So it's something we would recommend the township do as well.
To me, this is like the chicken and the egg, though. I mean, that's one of the things that should be first, should know what your capacity is, why you're fixing what you're fixing, or spending what you're spending, I guess, eh?
Right. And that's the whole like reason for the master plan. That's why we're recommending it. It's like you should know where you stand in terms of your infrastructure capacity. Because we might find as part of the master plan, you'll find that, yes, you spend all this money on the wastewater treatment plant, but there's something else that's more pressing that's stopping you, right? That maybe you didn't know about, right? So it's the EA was very focused on the wastewater plant. We didn't look into the water distribution system or anything like that. But if there's any concerns there, then it'd be good to have in one document have a list of all of the things you have to do and when you have to do them, how much it's going to cost them, and them. So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So yeah, so like I said, the wastewater treatment plant might not be the only thing that's limiting development. Okay.
So Gustavo, just to follow up on that, are you suggesting that this master plan should be done before anything else at this point?
No, I don't think that's realistic because you'll be slowing yourself down. Like I think, like well, the EA and the work that was done for the master for the plant would fit into the master plan, so you don't have to repeat that whole exercise. All that analysis is still useful, still valid, but now the master plan would look beyond the wastewater. It would look upstream. It would look at the pumping station. Kind of like I think the next discussion is standby power generation, right? So, like, does your facilities have capacity? Do they need to be expanded? If they get expanded, how do you expand them? How much is it going to cost, right? And then new development areas would say, okay, well, I need to accommodate all that new demand. I need to upsize my water mains, or I need to increase my treatment capacity at the wells and so on, right? So I think if you consider the EA is typically you would do it after the master plan, but since it's been done before, the EA has gone in more detail than the master plan would. So it's just the master plan would just build upon that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel there. Just focus on the stuff that hasn't been looked at, water and distribution, so on and so forth. And so you have here the kind of the main steps in what a master plan does is like you first look at the water and wastewater flow projections, which translates into growth. How many units do you expect to have? And where is that development happening, right? So that gets translated into a demand, a water demand, or wastewater flow. And then you compare that to the capacity you have in your system, both in the pipes and the tanks, the pumps, and so on. And then there's a gap, right? Well, there's a gap. I'm going to need more capacity here, here, here. And then you come up with a strategy to say, okay, well, does it make sense to replace this, or should I just build a new one? Or maybe I can do this a bit differently. You come up with a strategy, and then based on that, you come up with a list of projects that will say, in the next 20 years, you have to do A, B, C, and D, and that will allow you to service your development. And then you take this document and also feeds your other planning endeavors and your rate studies and your DC studies, right? So then your DC would cover all the projects that are growth related that are listed on the master plan. So that's simplistically what a master plan looks like. And so anyway, so just kind of here, the recommendation was, this was done, I think, earlier this year when things were a bit different in terms of the EA process. The EA process, since the ministry has come up with a new recommended approach for EAs and hasn't passed yet, but potentially the requirements for what's called a Schedule B or Schedule B project are less stringent now, which I guess helps expedite some of the work. So in our original proposal, we had a provisional item for public consultation. That is not mandatory. That is something that you could or could not do. It's not really required. But so you have base cost versus optional items. And then we put in this hydraulic modeling to the idea of building hydraulic models of your water and wastewater systems that could be used by the township on an ongoing basis. If a development application comes in, it says, okay, what can I connect? Okay, you can just plug it in and see what happens, right? So, but as a base, we have the number at the top. That's the baseline cost. And I think that's it. Yeah, so that's it. That's the end of the presentation.
So for today, with the phase one, like there's two parts to it. So the phase one, the big thing is going to be getting funding or getting some help with that. But is it possible to get a motion that we explore this and try and move on with it? Because we are going to have to do it. It's just how we pay for it. It's going to be the biggest question of all. So I don't know what the motion would look like, so.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it said we have to do it, and I don't know, it's up to the rest of council as well, but. In terms of me, like, I don't like the price either, but it's something I think in terms of moving forward, we're gonna have to do, so let's get it started here, whatever. You know, if we get the design work and that started and we can worry about where we're gonna get the money here eventually, but let's get it started, so.
A second.
Yes, so you're moving that?
Sorry, can I just,
Yeah,
Gustavo, you had a slide that showed phase one design. Can you just bring that up? There, that one. So I think your motion is to proceed with this.
Yeah.
okay, that part.
So your motion is we're gonna tender this job now without
No,
having money,
No,
we're gonna do the design and.
FEMA to proceed.
design and tendering.
Right.
Is that what it says?
Yeah, but we won't be able to tender until we figure out where the money's coming from, and hopefully we can figure that out in the short.
Was part of the question, is what is the motion? Is the motion to do what's on the screen, or is it the motion?
It would be to direct staff, I think, to move ahead with this, or figure out how we can move ahead with this, because the funding is gonna come into it. So, direct staff to look in.
Begin the process of
Yeah,
beginning phase one.
yeah,
I don't know if we want to keep it general, so. And that would include.
and then we'll get a report, come back
Contacting
to us how we can pay for it, where the money's gonna come from, and to finalize it, but for today, it would be to direct staff to figure out how we can move ahead with this.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's move by Deputy Mayor Webb.
I'm still second.
You're seconding that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Record.
any questions? Okay, record a vote.
All right, through you, Mayor Martin, there's been a recorded vote requested by Councillor Doherty regarding the motion. The motion moved by Deputy Mayor Webb, seconded by Councillor Flagler. That staff is hereby authorized to commence the process for the design and tendering of the phase one of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and to explore funding opportunities prior to the work commencing.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna go around the table. We'll start with Mayor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Flagler,
Yes.
Councillor Doherty,
No.
Councillor Clement,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Webb.
Yes,
The motion is carried. 4 yeses to 1 no.
Okay. All right then. So the next one here is with regards to and I don't know if this could wait till budget, like the water master plans that there, I don't know if it's as urgent. I know it's urgent. They would complement each other, and it would really go along with our asset management plan. But for today, do we need a motion on that? What's your thoughts to get same sort of thing to find out how we can get something like that going, or we can refer it to budget?
yeah, well, I think probably both. I think it's something that'll have to come to budget. I just had a question for Gustavo in terms of, you already asked about funding for the overall project. Is there funding available for stuff like the master plan, like or grants rather?
Typically, no. I mean, typically no, unfortunately.
Gotta ask.
Yeah. So right now, motion I would think would be to to refer this to budget, and
Okay.
and staff can look into if there's any way of funding something like that.
A question first, if we can, or you want to wait to get a seconder and then?
Go ahead.
On the generator that we're getting replaced, is it because of its life expectancy is coming to an end? Is that the main reason?
That's the next part of it. So we'll get this part out of the way, and then we'll move into the second. So, okay, so you were moving that document, you have the.
Refer to budget and
Refer to
just
budget.
start looking into it, yeah.
And seconded by Councillor Clement. Any questions around that? All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so All right then, well, thank you. I think that's it for your presentation, so. Yeah, we're gonna take 5 minutes and then we'll, and our level adjustment and whatnot. That's. Everything now, I thought you were gonna lose your voice maybe, and then you'll say, I can't do it. Okay, so, we didn't get a motion to this.
No. Motion to resume after.
Motion to resume. Deputy Mayor Webb. Councilor Clement, all in favor? Carried. I think it's the same when we took the recess.
Yes.
So anyways, okay, so we're gonna move into the next part of the meeting here, and that's generator replacement project. With Aqua. Amy or Amber or all of these?
Together. She's the technical person, right? So we're here today to talk about the generator project, and there's two items with it. One is the approval of the actual project itself, and then two is the discussion around how you want to pay for it. So the successful bid was the $110,950. So the bid was valid until May 28th. So unfortunately, we've already passed that, but they had a written in clause that it was $2,000 per month additional if you didn't make a decision before that date. So with Aqua's service fee, the HST that has to go on the project, which is the same as a municipality, only 1.76%. And with that $2,000, the project estimate comes out at $123,684 if we approve before the end of the month of June. So that's the first item that we would like you to make a decision on, is whether we are going to proceed. As to the why we have to do this generator project, I'll let Amber give you those brief update.
Thanks, Emily. So the generator is straight from the look at Brad permanent, but I think it was from the 70s. And it'll run forever and never die is what our generator technician has told us. Unfortunately, the parts are obsolete. So it's no longer able to maintain any maintenance. So we're going to need to request that it be replaced. It is the only sewage pumping station that is in Havelock, but it has a generator that definitely needs to be replaced. When Aqua submitted a proposal for replacement, we, instead of moving from diesel, we went to natural gas because there's a line along the way. So that should also be helpful with costs.
So the generator that's there now, is that the one from the old well 3, or where did it come from? Like I thought,
There's the one that well 3 got moved to the waste one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This would be like original. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah. And she said she was the technician that we have. It'll never die. She's like, but unfortunately the parts aren't made anymore. So we've actually talked to township staff just to say, when we remove it, do you want to maintain it and keep it for another facility so that it's not going to scrap? Something to consider.
For the splash pad.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. And
Could you repeat that last part? If we buy a new one, we're going to take that one out. What are we going to do with the old one?
I just made recommendations to the township that they could use it until the parts are completely obsolete. It's just for emergency situations. I can't have a generator that I might be able to get parts for. So we've just offered. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Good to know. So, okay. So yeah, and back when we were talking about generators at one time, like they always said, and I think that was around the diesel, that the natural gas weren't as they didn't have as much torque in them or something like that. Is that changed now? Have they come a long way on generators? Because that was the wastewater treatment plant. But when the discussions were always that natural gas were hard to
yeah, I think technology's improved and they spec it to run that facility. Right? Okay. So it'll run it. We got them in other accounts.
Yeah,
they work great. You don't have to worry about filling up with fuel. It is,
especially in emergency situations, like when we have non-power outages or a big storm or anything along those lines where you're needing fuel. It's not. We've had issues where it's come close. So. And then that pump station as well. Like when the power goes out, if you don't have standby power backup, there's 2 to 4 hours, and you can be in a basement. In a basement.
like back up.
Yeah, okay.
If the flows are real high, like in the spring, when you see those spikes. Snowball's presentation, like maybe an hour.
Okay. Councilor Clement, you had a question?
So what is the warranty on parts and labor for the new generator?
I haven't looked at, I'm sorry, I haven't looked into that. I do know that it is in the proposal that they've provided us, so I can give an information to Bob after if you like.
Okay. Any other questions? So Bob, let's see, what are we looking for here as far as this has been approved as far as the
Yes, through you, Mayor Martin, the motion would be to approve the purchase of the generator. Total cost $123,684.82.
Was she gonna talk about how we're gonna pay for it? Or are we doing that separate?
Okay.
That'll be a separate motion.
Okay.
Can we talk about it before we?
We can.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, so Aqua historically had a program where we would offer to defer payments over the life of a contract with our municipal clients. Honestly, that program is now done. We got special permission to finish the program with you. So that's just a change in Aqua management and a change in government, change the rules on us a little bit. So we do have a year and a half left on the current contract. So we can defer, we can essentially divide the payments up over the remaining 18 months. And so you just pay it on a monthly fee on your regular O&M invoice. It would show up as a separate line item. So you would see it separately from the O&M of the wastewater plant. So that's the one option. The second option is that it's just treated as a capital project like we do it in anything else, and you can just pay it in one lump sum.
Okay. Okay. Questions?
What's the discount if you pay up front then?
Oh,
The discount is if you pay over long term, I'm not charging you any interest.
Okay, Beth.
So if council decides to do the payment plan, it'll be more than 123 at the end of it, or it's 123 divided by the
18 months.
18 months.
Yes.
So there is no fees.
There's no fee.
Thank you.
Okay.
I
So,
did look too, through you, sorry. I did look in Aquas for a 1-year warranty on all parts and maintenance, but I assume the generator would probably come with its own, but that's what we've asked for from the contractor.
all right. Any questions or just thoughts or? Okay.
How much did we budget for this? Are we close?
Did we budget?
No, we didn't budget for it? Okay.
So that's where
The line question, there is there.
Through you, Chair, the amount that was originally budgeted was $65,000, and in the 2023 budget, there was a motion during budget deliberations to split that over 3 years. So $21,666 was included in the 2023 budget. But to your point, the original budget for the budgeted amount for the generator was $65,000 in total.
So there's an opportunity here just to finance it with Aqua. And
Just for clarification, Lionel, so how much money do we have there, Lionel, now?
Through you, Chair, right now we have $21,666 attributed to that generator.
Okay, thank you, Lionel.
so why don't we just use it and then finance the rest? Is that an option too? Like,
Yeah.
Two. Whatever.
like it was budgeted for, so I just wondered if you take that off the top and then finance the rest over the 18 months.
Well,
We still gotta come up with the money.
So we got the money in the budget to pay the 6 months, which is $42,000.
That's
we have the opportunity to pay this off at any time, being that if we want to go to the mayor's point in terms of this monthly, because we got budgeted money here. And then, but once we hit budget, we might allocate the whole amount. So I mean, say we pay $6,000 for the next 4 months. And then when, after the 4 months, if we do budget, we get the money, we can just cut you a check for the other, whatever, 80 grand.
Absolutely. This was just something that we were trying to do to help you pay over a longer term. Unfortunately, we're running out of months now, but yeah, if you decide at December 1st, you want to pay it off in full, that's fine.
It might be easier for us, our treasurer, in terms of following it from year to year, right? So,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the council's point there, yeah, that's right. I guess the money that's there in the budget, we couldn't take it off the top. We'd have to use it to get through to the budget, like use that 21,000 to over the next 3 months anyways, or 4 months to get through the budget process and see where we finish it at. So no matter what, we got to come up with the money, but it'll give us time to get through to there.
I also have a question. It's also for Emma because I'm not sure, but it's for everyone. Is this would be invoiced after the project's complete, or you'd start right now with the monthlies?
We would start July 1st if that works for everyone, just to give it the full 18 months. We can delay if you want. Like we're very flexible on how you want it done from us. But my plan was to start July 1st, just to give you the full 18 months. And the process for it is just, we would do a change order to our O&M agreement. So it's a 1-page document that just says we're adding this amount to your annual fee essentially. And so it's not a big process. It's very simple.
What's the time frame on this? Are they back ordered? Is it 1-2 years, or what's the?
No, so the contractor that we're going to be awarding it to has told me that he has at the time when we talked, so that was in May or so, he did have one on order. So I'm not sure I can follow up, but it could be 6 months. But as I understood, he said he's aware of one and he can grab it. So I'll report back.
All right, so. No.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Martin. The last statement that you made just kind of bothered me. Is that a refurbished one?
No.
It's a brand new machine,
Yes,
is it?
sorry.
Okay, it's just the way you worded that.
I think it's a Cummins, and he's familiar with these people. He works with them all the time, so he's just gonna get one from there. But yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
What's council's thoughts here as far as a motion?
So on the first half, Bob, you want an approval to proceed?
We can do it all as one motion, it's fine.
Can I ask one more question? Lionel, what do you suggest for the payment? What do you think is to our advantage?
Through you, Chair, if there's no interest being charged, then I don't see any issue with spreading it out. If we have more than 3 payments in 2024, then I guess technically we're asking for approval to spend that extra money in 2024, and we'd have to decide where that comes from. It could be from one of the reserves, but if we wanted to align it completely with what's already been approved, that being the 21,666, we could start the payments in October, and then those 3 payments would be used up by the amount in the 2023 budget. And then as part of the budget process, we could decide if we wanted to go with a lump sum or continue with the monthly payments.
So to get us through to the end of the year, the motion today would be that we move ahead with what we have, and then we'll have to have a report come back to us on where the balance comes through to get to the end of the year. Or we start in 2 months.
But we start on July 1st. Maybe my math's off, but if we start on July 1st, that means we've got 6 months to the end of the year. 6 times rounded off to 7,000 is $42,000. We have a budget already set aside for 65.
21.
21. He said we only have 21 in there.
I thought you said 65 with
They're
budget.
broken down in over 3 years.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah,
that's the point. Okay.
So yeah, we only got 21. So we're trying to figure out how we can only spend 21.
Yeah, so it's just that we can get a report to come back.
Yeah, I
finish on what
we think.
In terms of, I guess that's probably why you're bringing it, but this is, I won't say it's really needed, because obviously it's really needed, but I mean, is this thing in jeopardy of going down tomorrow, or,
No.
you know?
No, through you, Mayor Martin, we have generator maintenance scheduled for July, and we'll know more then, but it's been on the radar for a couple of years now. We've been bringing it, just letting you know that it's
Okay.
on its way out. We wouldn't put it in a situation where we don't have backup parts we do right now, but this year we'll get another report about its status.
So just further to the treasurer's point, if we put this off and didn't start it till say October in terms of the payments, would that put us in any jeopardy over there in terms of not being functional or?
In terms of the payments emanate, but the project would have to start right away just because the contractors could potentially walk away from the bid because it's been going on, but in terms of. Up to you.
So, yes, I'm asking you, is it?
Yeah, so normally what would happen with a major maintenance project, you would pay for it when it was done. When we were done with the project, we would send you an invoice and you would pay for it. So this one, we can start payments whenever you want. You're kind of starting ahead of the project being completed. Yeah, it's kind of that deferred payment program just to give you the time to do it. If you wanted to leave it all until the project was done, well, Amber can get an idea when that would be. And we could just start then, but it's really up to the municipality how you want to deal with it.
Well, I'll defer to Lionel in terms of making the final decision, or I guess council eventually, but yeah, I guess to me, we do the October, because then when we do the budget, we'll probably obviously gonna say allocate the remaining amount, and then we can just pay you off in full that way, right? But I don't know if that makes it easier or not, Lionel, if it's easier just to pay it off all next year.
Through Chair, I think I would agree that it would make sense to start in October. Then by the time we are in budget deliberations, we can choose the budget process how we want to proceed from there, whether it be via a lump sum or continuance of the monthly payments. But that would at least use up the already approved amount of the 21,666.
So I just want to make sure though, you will order it immediately if we say yes today? Yeah. So we don't have to pay the other 2,000 every month? No. Wait a minute, okay. Don't waste any more money.
I guess if he's gonna, or the contractor is saying $2,000, so if we say yes, go ahead and buy it, is there a penalty to him if he doesn't provide it on a monthly basis after that?
No, I'm not sure, to be honest. I can look into it, but.
Oh, no, I'm being
Sure.
facetious, but it's okay for us to delay it a month. But if they say we can't get it for 6 months, too bad, there's going to be an order, that's on us.
I think it's just recently, I think there's some issues with the amount of major maintenance and capital that's getting done just because of towns are expanding, that a lot of projects are going without acknowledgement. So I think this is common now for contractors to add it so that they can get their projects moving and stay on their schedule. So.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we proceed and we'll take Lionel's advice and start in October.
Okay.
We need to get this done, honestly. It's 30 years old, right?
The discussion of budget will be for the balance, right? Okay, so moved by Councillor Clement, that we move ahead. Second by Councillor Doherty. Okay, any other questions around? All in favor? And carry. So thank you. That concludes the business for today. So I'll look for the affirming bylaw. Councillor Clement, seconded by Councillor Flagler. All in favor? And that's carried. Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Webb and Councillor Doherty. All in favor? Carried. So thank you very much.